that are happening too. So please welcome Gary Thomas from DART. And I had a little bit more hair and didn't need glasses back then either, 15 years ago.
Yeah, both of us were in that same situation. Peter, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here this morning. Peter does a great job putting this together, bringing everybody together. Let's give Peter a round of applause and thank him for all that he does. He puts a lot of energy and he's tireless in advocating for rail throughout the state of Texas. So Peter, we really do appreciate you. What I'd like to do this morning is just give you a brief update on some of the things that are going on at DART these days. And the guy said, Gary, it's simple, just hit the big button. So if I screw this up, I didn't hit the big button, did I? So a lot's going on. As Peter said, we do have the longest light rail system in North America. And I say that a lot. You've probably heard me say it before. Staff hears it every day, I think. And they all chuckle. Matt, of course, thank you for being part of DART and thank you for being on this board. But it's something that we feel very proud about, because who would have thought in North Texas that we would be in this situation? Now, some people will actually criticize us, Ron, for having the longest light rail system in North America, because they say, well, it goes too many places, it's too spread out. But the reality is we have a lot of people in North America, in North Texas rather, and as a matter of fact, just within the DART service area, we have about 2.3 million people. There are 13 cities that make up the service area, and as you know, there's what, 6.5, closing in on 7 million people in the Dallas-Fort Worth region. So a lot of people are moving through the system. A lot of people are trying to get from where they are to where they need to be at any given point in time. And I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the presentation. But our job has been to continue to respond to a plan that we didn't dream up in 1983, but the citizens within our region actually came up with. The cities that make up DART actually came up with a plan and said, this is what we want, this is what we expect you to do, and we're going to go ahead and dedicate, through an election, dedicate a 1% sales tax to create an organization that, quite frankly, people didn't know if we're going to succeed or not. But in 1983, they knew traffic was pretty bad. Think about that for a minute. I think in 1983, Central was still 2 lanes either direction, and at some points it had a chain link fence dividing northbound, southbound, if I remember correctly. And so things have changed a lot in our region as we continue to move forward. As you can see, the light rail map, and some of you certainly probably have the rail maps from places throughout the world. This is ours, and it is right now at 93 miles. And many of you in the room, as I look around, have been involved in helping us achieve that. So the first project that I'll start with is the eastern end of TexRail. Councilwoman Ann Zeta from Fort Worth, Ann was one of the first ones on the TexRail opening, I guess 2 weeks ago yesterday, as to be precise. So Fort Worth has got the western half of this project open. We're all excited about that. Now we're working on the eastern half. We refer to it as the Cotton Belt. It goes from the airport, same station that TexRail goes into at Terminal B. And it'll go over to the east as it goes through Coppell, of course, downtown Carrollton, and then it crosses over through Addison, North Dallas. It goes past UTD in Richardson and on into Plano and ends at Shiloh Road. Now, some of you probably are already aware, DART owns this corridor from the stockyards all the way to Wiley. So that's the benefit that we have in this region, is that we work very closely with all the partners, the Fort Worth Transportation Authority, Denton County Transportation Authority, of course our partners at BNSF, Paul Olivia, thank you very much, and Union Pacific. So we work very closely with everybody involved to make sure that we're doing the right thing, and that we also can put passenger traffic at least where we can throughout the corridor. So we've been working on this corridor for some time. As a matter of fact, this line was on the map in 1983. It didn't look quite like this, but it was on the map in 1983. So people have an expectation, as I said before, that we're really going to get this done and we're really going to do it. So as many of you know, we've been working on it. We're not done yet, Tim, but Tim assures me that we're already ahead of schedule and under budget. We issued notice to proceed to the design build team a couple of weeks ago, January 8th. So it's scheduled to be done in Tim would say December 31st, 2022, but I keep saying June sounds like a better time. And he looks at me and laughs. But that's okay. This project, as many of you know, this project has been a little bit challenging. There's been a few folks that are very, very concerned about what this project looks like, what the rail line looks like, how it interfaces with their community and their neighborhood. So back in August of 2016, I guess it was, we went out and we had several community meetings, and we said, we've come up with a funding plan, because that was the biggest challenge. How are we going to pay for this? It was in our financial plan going back to 2006, but we said we're really not going to be able to get to it, especially with a downturn in the economy in 2009. We said we're really not going to be able to get to it until 2035, 2038 timeframe. So a lot of people started looking at how we could maybe accelerate that. And we had a meeting, our CFO at the time, David Leininger, myself, and Michael Morris had a meeting at the Cracker Barrel where all good things happen, right, in Arlington. And we talked about funding on a $1.135 billion project and how we were going to pull all those funds together. And so as we sat there and we talked about where those funds were going to come from, who the partners were, the core of that, as we envisioned it at the time, was a RIF loan, a Railroad Rehabilitation Infrastructure Financing loan through the FRA. And it certainly made all the sense to us. It's a pot of money that has not been utilized, Alan, for a long time. And so we thought, shoot, let's see if we can get some of that money. And so we started having the conversations with the FRA. And they got excited about it, and so we continue to do that. Michael had put together some thoughts and ideas on where the funding would come from. And we started having our public meetings. We went out in that August of 2016 timeframe and started letting people know we've got a plan. And we think we can pull this project forward from 2035, 2038 to 2022. And of course, as you can imagine, when you pull a project that far forward that quickly, you also save an awful lot of money just in inflation costs. So by the time we put all of this together, we had a $1.1 billion project in mind. We started having our public meetings up and down the corridor, telling people what was going on. Charles Gillette on our Citizens Advisory Council has been very engaged and involved in that as well. And we've got our environmental impact study completed. We finalized that. We closed our RIF loan on the 20th of December. Yes, just a few days before the shutdown. So, and we've already made our first draw on that a few days before the shutdown. So we've already made, and this loan is a little bit different because we actually draw down on this loan. They don't write us a big check. It's a $908 million loan. And the way the RIF program works is we pay 1 basis point over Treasury for whatever 30-year Treasury notes are at that point in time. So we had budgeted 3.75%, which is not a bad interest rate. All by itself, we got 2.98% interest rate. Now, on a $908 million loan, that's a lot of money savings. As a matter of fact, over the life of the loan, it's $180 million savings. Peter, what we're looking at now is perhaps double tracking the entire corridor on the eastern side with a portion, about 2/3 of the savings that we'll see off of that loan. So we're pretty excited about that. As I said, we signed the contract, issued the notice to proceed on January 8th. The design build team, which is Archer, Western, Herzog, has already started. And so they'll be going through the design process this year. And then we'll be hopefully starting construction before this time next year. So the challenge now is, what does a groundbreaking look like on a corridor that stretches 26 miles and involves 5 or 6 cities? That's, in my world, that's the conversation that we're having now. Everybody has said, well, Gary, we want the groundbreaking in our city. And then the next conversation is, we want the groundbreaking in our city. And so what we're working on is a simultaneous groundbreaking where we turn dirt at the exact same time, just like you would expect a railroad to do, in multiple cities across the corridor. So we're excited about this project. We expect to, we just took proposals on our rolling stock. As you might not be too surprised, our rolling stock is going to look very, very similar to the Trinity Metro's rolling stock, because, you know, at the end of the day, the preponderance of traffic on this corridor is going to go across the corridor. The airport's an important part of it, but a lot of people are going across the corridor to get from one place to another, and normally that involves work. And so we want to make sure that those vehicles can go all the way across the corridor and connect the entire region. So we're looking forward to that. Our maintenance facility will actually be an expansion of our existing maintenance facility on the TRE corridor. So that, we just took proposals on that as well. So that work will be starting up shortly. Also, the other project that we're working on is a second alignment in downtown Dallas. Another somewhat challenging project. When we first started the planning effort, we started the planning effort for both projects. This project is about a $1.3, $1.4 billion project. And as many of you know, the story on this project was, we started out really backing into the project, if you will. We knew there was a pot of money at the federal government called core capacity funding. And so we identified our local match, what we could afford from a local perspective, and then came up with a $650 million project. It was half at grade, half below grade. Again, as I told the FTA, we went through an extensive public meetings process, public involvement process, and as I met with then Administrator Carolyn Flowers, I said the good news is we had a very robust public process. The bad news is the public didn't agree with our original premise. And so that meant that we had to back up and look at doing it a little bit differently. And the way that the stakeholders and property owners wanted it was entirely below grade. So the project is just shy of 3 miles long. And you can generally see the alignment. If you can see the map, you can see the alignment. It branches off our existing green line near the Victory Station American Airlines Center. It heads down Houston Street. And typically that would be pretty complicated, but what some of you probably remember is that before American Airlines Center was ever built, there used to be a brownfield site, and there was an old railroad spur that went right through the middle of where American Airlines Center is today. I mean, they'd have to dribble around the railroad tracks if they were still playing basketball, if the tracks were there during the basketball game. Well, we own those tracks. So when they were negotiating that deal, we had a little bit of leverage as we were working through that process. And they asked, so what do you want in addition to some cash, obviously? Do you want advertising in the arena? We said, sure, that'd be good. So if you go to a hockey game or a basketball game, you'll always see DART being advertised at some point in time during those games. That's part of the deal. It goes on as long as that facility is there. They also asked if we wanted a box. We said, no, we don't want a box. That would be a bad thing. The newspaper, Peter, your newspaper guys would have loved that. But we do want some right-of-way on Houston Street to preserve so we can, when we do this second alignment, we can make that work. So we've had that right-of-way for some time now. So that part's fairly easy. As we head south, we get to Woodall Rogers, and that's where we go underground. So we go past the Perot Museum. We go underground, Perot Museum, there'll be a station right there. They're very excited about it. If you're familiar with where the Perot Museum is, you know there's a lot of parking lots right there. Those parking lots are all going to change in the next few years. They're all going to be developed. There'll be buildings there because people know that station is coming and they're excited about it. We'll go underground. We'll continue to head south on Griffin Street. And then when we get to Commerce Street, we'll turn left, and we'll continue to stay underground underneath Commerce Street, and we'll head toward the east side of downtown Dallas, and we'll come up near 345. If you're familiar with 345, that's a little piece of highway between Interstate 45 and US 75. Now, there are folks that are saying we need to lower 345. We're not in that fight. We'll let TxDOT and other folks deal with that. But what we're doing is making sure our design, as we come up right there, that we can accommodate 345, whether it's elevated, at grade, or below grade. So we come up right next to the, Tim, is it the blonde bomb, whatever that bar is. Obviously, I don't know what the name of the bar is. That bar has the 5th highest liquor sales in the state of Texas. So they're pretty interested in where we're coming up out of ground too. And what we've learned a lot about bars and the lifespan of bars as we go through this design process, what we learned is that bars reinvent themselves every 5 years. And so about the time that we're coming up out of the ground, this bar is going to need to reinvent themselves. And so they're already thinking about how they can incorporate their design, their reinvention in 5 years around our rail line coming up out of the ground. Now, I'm not sure what that means for their alcohol sales. What we'll need to do, obviously, is make sure it's safe and probably encapsulated somehow. But it is kind of fun to have those conversations. Now, we have a locally preferred alternative. The City Council, Dallas City Council approved about a year ago. We're working through that now. As is always the case with a locally preferred alternative, you have a little flexibility. We're looking at moving that east end a little bit further south so we miss Carpenter Park and we miss a couple of very large parking garages. Unfortunately, it puts us in the middle of a couple of other buildings that property owner is saying, well, maybe you need to look for a different alignment now. So we're working through that conversation on the east end of this project. This will be funded, we anticipate, funded 50% from the federal government. Remember, it went from a $650 million project to a $1.3 billion project. We're working through that conversation with the FTA as well. We anticipate a 2024 revenue service date. Somebody asked me yesterday, so is the government shutdown going to slow that project down? I hope they're open before 2024, but that's our plan, and so we're going to stick to it. This gives you a few of the details. It adds some passenger trips to the corridor, but what it really does, it gives us a lot more flexibility in downtown Dallas. As you and I both know, if we have any problem along that existing corridor, all of our light rail lines go through a central corridor. If we have any problems on that corridor, it shuts us down, and it's amazing how many people, all of a sudden everybody realizes how many people we really do carry in the morning and the evening when we have a shutdown on that corridor. So it frees up some space on the existing corridor and also gives us quite a bit of flexibility. Another project that we're working on is our rail platform extension. And this is one that, again, who would have thought when we opened these platforms initially, all the platforms up to and including the platforms that opened in 2002, we're trying to lengthen those now. We'll lengthen them so we can add one more car to our consist, so we'll have 3-car trains on the red and blue line. Currently, we can run 3-car trains on the green line, and the new part of the orange line, the new part of the blue line, but not the core blue line and red line. Adding a car to our trains, and the train on the red line will run every 7.5 minutes roughly, on the blue line every 15 minutes. Adding one car means 92 more seats for that train, and you could also imagine that normal daily loads, morning PM peaks, are going to add, we could probably add another 150 people total. That's certainly not Texas OU crush loads, but just the normal AM PM peak. So this is important. We're pretty much all the way through the design process, and this is one where we are waiting for the FTA to issue a full funding grant agreement. We anticipated having that in the middle of this month. Obviously, that's not happening. Half of this funding comes from the FTA. The other half comes from TxDOT. So Peter, you were talking about the percentage of funding that goes to highways. That other, whatever it is, 0.5% or maybe 1%, this is a little bit of that as they funded the other half. This is a $120 million program, and so we are excited about that. As soon as we get the balance, we'll be able to move forward. And this gives you a few of the details on that project. The streetcar project is extension of the modern streetcar. We're working with the city of Dallas on what that alignment through downtown looks like. This is an extension of the modern streetcar from Union Station over and connecting to, at the very least, the McKinney Avenue trolley streetcar. A lot of folks are interested in extending the modern streetcar all the way up to Knox Henderson, if you're familiar with the area. And that means that, yes, it would supplant the historic streetcar, but I'm not saying that would go away. I'm saying that we would use that generally, John, in the evenings, weekends, special events probably. So we'd still retain the historic cars for special events, but let the modern cars bear the bulk of the weekday services as we move forward. So as I said, we're waiting on the city of Dallas for the alignment. We hope to have that project completed in the 2022 timeframe. And then the last thing I'll talk about quickly is the mobility as a service framework. You know, we talk a lot about the way transportation is changing. Transportation is changing now faster than it's changed in the last 100 years or so. For transit especially doesn't change very quickly. The buses and trains have been around for quite a while. Quite frankly, we're a little resistant to change, primarily because we're a little afraid of change. We're risk adverse. We transit agencies are risk adverse. We don't like to be on the bleeding edge of anything, and oftentimes we can find ourselves there inadvertently. But we also understand things are changing, and if we don't change, we're going to find ourselves being left behind. If we don't figure out how to keep up with the on-demand kind of approach everybody has migrated to, and we see it in our world every single day. When you order on Amazon, next week delivery certainly isn't any good. Tomorrow delivery is only sometimes good. This afternoon would be better, right? That's where we've kind of evolved to as a society. And transportation is no different. We see it with the TNCs, the transportation network companies. When someone wants to go from here to downtown, they might want to walk over to the train station and catch a train, or they're probably going to stand out in the front of the hotel, call an Uber or Lyft and say, pick me up in 2 minutes and get me downtown. That immediate responsiveness is what we're working on, how we fit into that. Where do we fit in? What can we do to make that work. Now, some people will say transit agencies are obsolete. They're going to go away because we'll have automated vehicles. And yeah, I heard a groan in the front. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Think about that for a minute. Because when people think about automated vehicles, they're thinking about single occupant vehicles, right? You're replacing my car and your car with an automated vehicle. What that's going to mean is that for the first time in history, the average occupancy rate of vehicles will go below 1, because you'll have all these cars that'll be going around without anybody in them. So congestion doesn't get better with automated vehicles. It changes the way, probably now Toyota would suggest maybe not, but it probably changes the way we own vehicles, ownership of vehicles, as we look to the future. But are trains and buses going to go away? Now, there may be automated trains and buses, perhaps, but larger vehicles that hold lots of people are not going to disappear in my mind. So how do we fit into that? What's our program to look at? So what we're working on is how we integrate all the different modes of transportation, not just trains and buses. We know they're going to continue to be there, but if you wanted to go from here to any place else, what we want you to do is pull out our app, our GoPass app, and we want you to have that opportunity to plan your journey based on your criteria, based on what you want that journey to look like. If you want to use a train or a bus, or maybe you need a first mile, last mile connection and you want to use Uber or Lyft, Alto is another on-demand service that's going to be in our region pretty quickly. Maybe you really do want to ride a scooter in the middle of that journey. You can put that together, and based on your criteria, is it the quickest trip? Is it the least expensive trip? Does it include a scooter? What does it look like? You get to pick based on the choices that the app gives you, and then you pay for that trip on our app. So you're not bouncing back and forth between our app and somebody else's app. So the next step, so let me back up. Last year, we modified the app so you could use cash, because a lot of times now you have to tie your credit card to your app, right? Some people don't have a credit card. Some people don't feel comfortable tying a credit card to an app on their phone. So now you can go into one of almost 1,000 retail outlets and you can add cash to your GoPass wallet. The other thing that we did about a year ago is we allowed for, the other thing that we're very focused on is the low-income folks in our community will oftentimes pay more for whatever they get than everybody else because they don't have access. They can't buy in bulk. Transit is no different. Transit is no different throughout the United States. While we talk about who our customers are, we don't really deal with that. And so about a year ago, we modified our GoPass app so we have fare capping. If you buy a monthly pass, you're really only paying for 16 days of service through that month, and you get the other days free. Low-income folks couldn't do that. They buy their passes one day at a time. That's all they can afford. So now, using the GoPass or the GoTap, the smart card, when they hit that 16th day, they actually get the balance of the month for free, just like anybody else that would buy a monthly pass. So that was last year. January 28th, we'll roll out GoPass 3.0, and we'll start this integration, the full integration of other modes, other services. So it'll roll out slowly, but the first step is to integrate all of the microtransit that we've already added, the stuff in Plano, the services in southeast Dallas, and scooters, bird scooters. We're working with the jump scooters and bikes now. We're having conversations with Uber and Lyft and have. Talking to Alto, we're talking to 2 different air taxi companies. But the idea is that you go to our app, and it will tell you what your options are, how much they cost, how much time it's going to take, and let you pick, and then let you pay for it on that app. So that will start to roll out, like I said, just next week. And over this next year, you'll see more and more things as we roll out different fully integrated services in that app. But our world is changing. We appreciate that, and we're working to change with it. You know, as we talk about where that is in the scheme of things, that puts DART in the same group as places like Vienna and Helsinki and a few other folks in Europe, as we think about really transit transitioning to mobility as a service rather than just your typical bus and train company. So with that, I'll end. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.